The Barren Heart. Eleanor Wright pressed her palm against the stagecoach window, watching the town disappear behind clouds of dust. In her pocket, folded until the creases had worn thin, was a letter from a man she'd never met, a widower with 6 children who needed help, not a wife. She'd answered his advertisement knowing what she could never tell him, that her womb was empty, that she would never give him more children, that she was broken in ways the frontier didn't forgive. But desperation makes liars of us all, and Eleanor had run out of places to hide her shame. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Eleanor's story travels. And if her journey moves you, hit that like button. Now, let's see where this road takes her. The stagecoach hit another rut, and Eleanor's head knocked against the wooden frame. She didn't bother adjusting her position. Pain was useful. It kept her focused on the present instead of spiraling into the future she was hurtling toward. Across from her sat a woman with a sleeping infant tucked against her breast. The baby's tiny fist curled around a fold of her mother's shawl. Eleanor looked away, fixing her gaze on the passing landscape, endless stretches of grassland broken by rocky outcrops, the kind of country that swallowed people whole and gave nothing back. "First time out west?" the woman asked. Eleanor nodded. "Meeting family?" In a manner of speaking. The woman waited for elaboration that didn't come. After a moment, she shifted the baby to her other arm and closed her eyes. Eleanor was grateful. She'd practiced her story so many times the words had worn smooth as river stones, but she still wasn't sure she could deliver them without her voice cracking. "I'm going to help a widower with his children. Just a housekeeper. Nothing more." The truth was more complicated, twisted up in the letter she'd found tacked to the board outside the general store 3 weeks ago. She could still see Jonah Hale's careful handwriting, each word precisely formed as if he'd considered every one before committing ink to paper. Widower with 6 children seeks capable woman to manage household. Room and board provided. Wages negotiable. No false expectations. This is not a marriage proposal. This is an offer of honest work for honest pay. If you are seeking romance, look elsewhere. If you are seeking purpose, write to Jonah Hale, Box 47, Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory. Eleanor had read it 17 times before she'd found the courage to respond. Even then, her hand had shaken so badly, the first attempt had been illegible. She'd burned that letter and written another, stripping out everything personal, everything that might reveal how desperately she needed this. His reply had come faster than she'd expected. A single page, equally direct. "Miss Wright, your letter suggests competence and realistic expectations. That is more than I've found in 23 other responses. If you're still willing, take the Thursday stage to Redemption Creek. I'll meet you there. Bring what you can carry. The work is hard. The children are harder. If you have romantic notions about frontier life, abandon them now. But if you're strong enough to stay, you'll have a place here. J. Hale." She'd packed that night. Everything she owned fit into 2 carpet bags. Clothes worn thin from washing, a Bible her mother had given her, the silver locket she'd pawned and bought back 3 times, and the medical report she should have burned but couldn't quite bring herself to destroy. Patient presence with congenital malformation of the uterus. Pregnancy unlikely. Conception possible but not probable. Live birth, effectively impossible. The doctor had delivered the news with clinical detachment, as if he were discussing crop failure instead of dismantling her entire future. She'd been 22 then, engaged to Thomas Brennan, the banker's son who'd courted her with Sunday picnics and talk of the family they'd build. When she'd told him, he'd been kind. That was somehow worse than if he'd been cruel. "Eleanor, you know I care for you, but a man needs sons. A wife needs to give him that. You understand?" She'd understood. She'd understood when he'd married Sarah Pritchard 8 months later. She'd understood when she'd watched them parade their 3 children through town every Sunday. She'd understood that in a world that measured a woman's worth by her fertility, she would always come up short. The stagecoach jerked to a stop. Eleanor's stomach lurched. "Redemption Creek," the driver called. 15-minute stop. The woman with the baby gathered her things and stepped down. Eleanor remained frozen in her seat, her fingers clutched around the handle of her carpet bag. Through the window, she could see a ramshackle collection of buildings clinging to existence in the shadow of distant mountains. The town looked like it had been thrown together in a hurry and never quite recovered. Unpainted storefronts, A saloon with a crooked sign, a church that leaned slightly to the left as if uncertain of its own convictions. And standing beside a wagon, a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and wind. He wore work clothes, denim and worn leather, and a hat that had seen better years. He wasn't looking at the stagecoach. He was looking at the mountains, his expression unreadable. Eleanor forced herself to stand. Her legs trembled. This is your last chance to run. But there was nowhere to run to. Behind her was a town that would never let her forget what she wasn't. Ahead was a man who didn't know yet, children who would need her until they didn't, a life built on borrowed time. She stepped down from the stagecoach. The man turned. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds. He studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor had the unsettling sensation of being assessed, catalogued, judged. Miss Wright? Mr. Hale. He nodded once, then picked up her bags without asking permission. Wagons this way. She followed him, her boots crunching on the dry earth. Up close, she could see the lines etched deep around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He moved with the efficiency of a man who'd learned to waste neither time nor words. He loaded her bags into the wagon bed, then held out his hand to help her up. His palm was calloused, his grip firm and brief. They rode in silence. The town fell away behind them, replaced by open country that stretched endlessly in all directions. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold and amber, beautiful and indifferent. It's about an hour to the ranch, Jonah finally said. We'll arrive just before supper. How old are your children? Claire's 14, Ben's 12. The twins, Sarah and Samuel, are 9, Margaret's 6, and Caleb's 4. 6 children. The number had seemed abstract in the letter. Now it felt overwhelming. How long has it been? Eleanor asked carefully. Since you lost your wife. His jaw tightened. 2 years. Fever took her in 3 days. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. His tone wasn't bitter, just tired. Sorry doesn't cook meals or mend clothes or teach children how to keep living. Eleanor looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. No, it doesn't. They rode on. The silence stretched, but it wasn't entirely uncomfortable. Jonah didn't seem like a man who needed to fill space with empty conversation, and Eleanor had never been good at it anyway. The ranch appeared gradually, first a dark smudge on the horizon, then the distinct outline of buildings. A 2-story house, weathered but solid. A barn, a stable, a chicken coop, corrals that sprawled out behind. As they drew closer, Eleanor could see signs of neglect. Shutters hanging crooked, weeds choking the vegetable garden. A door on the barn that didn't quite close properly. The kind of slow decay that happened when people were too busy surviving to maintain. Jonah pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Before Eleanor could move, the front door banged open and children spilled out. The youngest, a little boy with dark curls, ran straight to Jonah. Papa, you're back! Jonah caught him easily, lifting him up. I told you I'd only be gone a few hours. I know, but... The boy noticed Eleanor and fell silent, his arms tightening around his father's neck. The other children gathered more slowly. The oldest, Clara, stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She wore a dress too small for her growing frame, and her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. This is Miss Wright, Jonah said. She'll be helping around the house. We don't need help. Clara's voice was flat. We've been managing fine. Clara, Jonah's tone held a warning. Eleanor stepped down from the wagon carefully. I'm sure you have been. Your father told me how capable you all are. Clara's expression didn't soften. The boy standing beside her, Ben, Eleanor guessed, stared at the ground. The twins clutched each other's hands. The 6-year-old girl half hid behind Ben's leg. Eleanor understood. They saw a stranger coming to claim space in a house that still belonged to their mother's memory. They saw a woman who might try to replace what couldn't be replaced. I'm not here to take anything from you, Eleanor said quietly. I'm just here to help carry what's heavy. Clara's eyes narrowed. We'll see. Jonah set Caleb down. Ben, help Miss Wright with her bags. Clara, show her to the spare room. Clara turned without a word and disappeared into the house. Ben picked up one of Eleanor's carpet bags, his movements careful, and gestured for her to follow. The interior was dim after the brightness outside. Eleanor's eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the main room, a large space that served as kitchen and living area combined. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Sturdy furniture, handmade and well-worn, filled the space. Everything was clean but chaotic. Dishes stacked haphazardly, laundry in various stages of folding, books and papers scattered across the table. The house smelled like wood smoke and coffee, and something else Eleanor couldn't quite name. Absence, maybe. The hollow space where someone used to be. Clara led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor. She pushed open a door at the end of the hall. This was supposed to be a sewing room. It's not much. The room was small but adequate. A bed with an iron frame, a dresser with a cloudy mirror, a single window that looked out over the back pasture. The walls were bare. The air smelled stale. "It's perfect," Eleanor said. "Thank you." Clara studied her for a long moment. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't made it through your first night." She left before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was thin but serviceable. Through the floor she could hear voices. Jonah's low rumble, the children's higher pitches, a burst of laughter that cut off abruptly. She unpacked slowly, giving herself time to steady her breathing. Dresses in the dresser, undergarments in the bottom drawer, her mother's Bible on the bedside table. The medical report she tucked into the very back of the bottom drawer, hidden beneath her spare stockings. When she finally descended the stairs, she found the family gathered around the table. They'd waited for her, though Clara's expression suggested it hadn't been her idea. "Sit," Jonah said, gesturing to an empty chair. The meal was simple. Beans and cornbread, coffee, strong enough to strip paint. The children ate quickly, efficiently, their table manners better than Eleanor had expected. No one spoke. Eleanor took small bites, her appetite non-existent, but her manners too ingrained to ignore. She could feel Clara watching her, cataloging every movement. "Miss Wright," Jonah said finally, "I rise at dawn. The children need breakfast by 6:30. Clara's been managing it, but—" "I can still manage it," Clara interrupted. "But I'd like you to focus on your studies," Jonah continued, his tone firm, "and helping Ben with the livestock." Clara's jaw set, but she didn't argue further. "I'll handle breakfast," Eleanor said. "What else needs doing?" Jonah listed tasks with the same efficiency he seemed to bring to everything. Laundry on Mondays, baking on Tuesdays, mending, cleaning, preserving, teaching the younger children their letters. The list was endless. Eleanor nodded, committing it all to memory. This was what she'd come for: work, purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. After dinner, the children scattered. Jonah retreated to the front porch. Eleanor began clearing dishes. She'd just started on the washing when Clara appeared beside her. "You don't have to do that tonight." "I don't mind." "I said you don't have to." Clara's voice had an edge now. Eleanor set down the plate she'd been scrubbing and turned to face her. "I heard you, but I do mind sitting idle when there's work to be done." They stared at each other. Clara was nearly as tall as Eleanor, built sturdy like her father. Her hands were red and chapped, the hands of someone who'd been doing women's work while still being a child. "She used to sing while she washed dishes," Clara said suddenly. "Did he tell you that?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "No." She had a terrible voice, but she sang anyway, every night. Clara's eyes glistened. "I don't want to hear someone else singing in her kitchen." "Then I won't sing," Eleanor said softly. Clara blinked rapidly, then turned and fled up the stairs. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, her hands dripping soap into the wash basin. Through the window, she could see Jonah's silhouette on the porch, still as stone. She finished the dishes in silence, dried them, put them away. Then she climbed the stairs to her small room and closed the door. She didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, she sat on the bed and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Somewhere in this house, 6 children were trying to figure out how to keep living without their mother. And she was trying to figure out how to help them without breaking her own heart in the process. Outside, a coyote called. Another answered. The sound was lonely and wild and somehow fitting. Eleanor lay down fully dressed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. The first week passed in a blur of routine and resistance. Eleanor woke before dawn, started the fire, made coffee, prepared breakfast. The children ate silently, watching her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Jonah barely spoke, rising from the table the moment he finished eating. She washed clothes until her hands cracked. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached. She baked bread and mended shirts and taught Margaret her letters, while the little girl kept one eye on the door, as if expecting someone else to walk through it. Clara watched everything, judged everything, corrected Eleanor's methods with barely concealed contempt. Mama folded the sheets this way. Mama added molasses to the beans. Mama always checked Ben's arithmetic because he tries to skip the hard problems. Eleanor absorbed it all without comment. She learned the house's rhythms, the children's patterns, the things that made them flinch, and the things that made them relax. She claimed no territory, offered no opinions unless asked, moved through the space like a shadow. At night, she collapsed into bed with muscles screaming and doubts multiplying. She hadn't expected gratitude. She wasn't naive. But she hadn't expected this wall of grief and resentment either, this silent insistence that she was trespassing. On Sunday, Jonah didn't go to church. Neither did the children. Eleanor didn't ask why. She spent the morning baking pies and the afternoon reading to Caleb, who seemed the least suspicious of her presence. Monday brought laundry again. Eleanor carried basket after basket to the creek, scrubbing each piece until her arms trembled. When she returned to the house, she found Margaret crying on the back step. Eleanor set down the basket. "What's wrong?" "I tore my dress." Margaret held up the fabric, showing a long rip along the seam. "Clara says we can't afford a new one, and I should have been more careful." "May I see?" Margaret handed it over reluctantly. Eleanor examined the tear, clean, easily mended. "This isn't so bad. I can fix it tonight." "Really?" Margaret's eyes widened. "It won't show?" "Barely at all. Mama always said I was too rough with my things." Margaret's voice got small. She said I needed to be more ladylike. Eleanor knelt down so she was eye level with the child. "Do you know what I think?" Margaret shook her head. "I think 6-year-olds are supposed to run and play, and sometimes tear their dresses. That's what being 6 is for." Margaret blinked at her. Then slowly she smiled. It was a small victory, but Eleanor would take it. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Eleanor sat by lamplight and mended the dress with tiny, invisible stitches. When she finished, she hung it on Margaret's door. The next morning, she found a wildflower on her breakfast plate. Margaret wouldn't meet her eyes, but her ears were pink. Ben softened next. Eleanor discovered he snuck out to the barn every evening to read by lantern light. Books about far-off places, adventures, things that had nothing to do with ranch life. She didn't tell Jonah. Instead, she started leaving books from her own small collection in the barn, always in the same spot, never mentioning it. One evening, Ben approached her while she was kneading bread. "Miss Wright, thank you for the book about the expedition." "You're welcome." "It's good, about people discovering new things." Eleanor looked at him. This 12-year-old boy with calluses already forming on his hands, dreams probably too big for the life mapped out for him. "Keep it as long as you need," she said. He nodded and disappeared back outside. The twins were harder. They operated as a single unit, finishing each other's sentences, communicating in looks and gestures. They didn't trust Eleanor, but they didn't distrust her either. She existed in their peripheral vision, neither threat nor comfort. Sarah started testing her, accidentally spilling milk, tracking mud through the clean kitchen, hiding items Eleanor needed. Small acts of sabotage, easily deniable. Eleanor didn't react. She cleaned up the milk, mopped the floor, found the hidden items. She'd dealt with grief before. She knew it needed somewhere to go. Samuel watched his sister's campaigns with worried eyes but said nothing. Eleanor wondered which twin had been closer to their mother, whether they took turns being strong for each other. 2 weeks in, Samuel fell and split his lip. Eleanor found him behind the chicken coop, blood running down his chin, tears streaming silently. She knelt beside him without speaking, pulled a clean handkerchief from her pocket, and pressed it gently to the wound. "Does it hurt terribly?" she asked. He nodded. "I once fell and knocked out a tooth when I was about your age. I cried for an hour." He looked at her skeptically through his tears. "Really? Really? My mother said I howled so loud the neighbors thought someone was dying." "What happened to the tooth?" "Gone forever. I have a gap in the back. Want to see?" She opened her mouth and showed him. He leaned closer, examining, and despite himself, smiled a little. Does it make it hard to eat? Not anymore. I got used to it. They sat in companionable silence while his lip stopped bleeding. When Sarah appeared around the corner, her face tight with worry, Samuel stood up quickly. I'm fine, he told his twin. Miss Wright fixed it. Sarah's eyes darted between them. Then she nodded once and took her brother's hand, leading him away. But the sabotage stopped after that. Clara remained a fortress. She spoke to Eleanor only when necessary, her words clipped and formal. She continued doing most of the work she'd been doing before Eleanor arrived, as if determined to prove she was unnecessary. Eleanor didn't challenge her. She simply did what Clara didn't, filled in the gaps, carried the load that was crushing this 14-year-old child who'd been forced to become a woman too soon. Late one night, Eleanor woke to the sound of crying. She lay still, listening. It was coming from Clara's room. She should stay in bed, mind her business, respect the boundaries Clara had drawn so clearly. She got up anyway. Clara's door was cracked open. Eleanor could see her silhouette, sitting on the floor beside her bed, shoulders shaking, trying desperately to muffle the sobs. Eleanor knocked softly. Clara? The crying stopped abruptly. Go away. I said go away. Eleanor pushed the door open anyway. Clara scrambled to her feet, swiping furiously at her face. I'm fine. Just leave me alone. You're not fine. What do you care? Clara's voice broke. You don't know me. You didn't know her. You're just here because Papa pays you. Eleanor absorbed the blow without flinching. That's true. I didn't know your mother, but I know what it's like to lose something you can't get back. You don't know anything about it. Maybe not, but I know you're caring too much, and I know that's not what she would want. Clara's face crumpled. How would you know what she wanted? Because I know what any mother would want. For her children to be children as long as they can, not to have to be adults before they're ready. I don't have a choice. The words came out ragged. Someone has to keep everything together. Someone has to make sure the little ones are okay. Someone has to... She broke off, pressing her fist to her eyes. I can't fall apart. I can't. Eleanor moved closer carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. You're allowed to fall apart. That's what I'm here for. To catch the pieces. I don't want you here. But Clara's voice had lost its sharp edge. Now it just sounded tired. I don't want someone new. I want her back. I know. It's not fair. No, it's not. Clara looked up at her, tears streaming freely now. Does it get better? Does it ever stop hurting? Eleanor thought about Thomas, about the future she'd lost, about all the ways life had failed to unfold as planned. It gets different. The hurt becomes part of you instead of all of you. You learn to carry it. I don't want to carry it. I want it gone. I know, sweetheart. I know. The endearment slipped out unbidden. Clara heard it, flinched, but didn't pull away when Eleanor stepped closer. They stood in the dim room, separated by 2 feet and an ocean of grief. Then slowly, Clara's walls cracked. She took one shuddering breath, then another, and then she was crying in earnest, the deep, racking sobs of someone who'd been holding everything in for far too long. Eleanor opened her arms. Clara fell into them. They sank to the floor together, Eleanor's back against the bed frame. Clara curled into her like a much younger child. Eleanor held her and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. Some pain was too big for words. Eventually, Clara's sobs quieted. She didn't pull away, just stayed there, exhausted and limp. I'm so tired, she whispered. I know. I try so hard, but nothing's ever enough. I can't cook like she did. I can't keep the house like she did. I can't be her. You're not supposed to be her. You're supposed to be you. Clara was quiet for a long moment. What if that's not enough? Eleanor's throat tightened. It is. I promise you, it is. They sat there until Clara fell asleep, her breathing evening out, her weight heavy and trusting in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor's arm had gone numb by the time she finally managed to shift Clara onto the bed without waking her. She pulled a quilt over the girl's sleeping form and stood there for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her breath. In sleep, Clara looked younger, the hard edges of responsibility smoothed away. Eleanor's chest ached with a feeling she couldn't quite name, something fierce and protective and dangerous. She returned to her own room as the first gray light crept through the window. There would be no more sleep tonight. Her body was exhausted, but her mind churned, replaying the weight of Clara's grief, the way she'd finally let herself break. By the time Eleanor made it downstairs, Jonah was already in the kitchen, pulling on his boots. "You're up early," he said without looking at her. "Couldn't sleep." He grunted, stood, reached for his hat. Then he paused, really looking at her for the first time. "You look like hell." "Thank you." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Clara give you trouble last night?" Eleanor measured her words carefully. "She's carrying a lot. She's strong." "She's 14. Jonah's jaw tightened. He settled his hat on his head, his movements deliberate. "What would you have me do? She's the oldest. Someone has to—" "Someone does. Me. That's why I'm here." They stared at each other across the kitchen. Outside, a rooster crowed. Jonah broke eye contact first. "Coffee's on the stove," he said, and walked out. Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She poured herself coffee, the bitter heat steadying her, then started breakfast. Biscuits, gravy, eggs from the henhouse. Her hands moved through the familiar motions while her thoughts drifted. She'd crossed a line last night, gotten involved in a way that went beyond hired help. The smart thing would be to step back, maintain distance, remember this was temporary. But Clara's tears had felt like a trust Eleanor couldn't betray. And temporary or not, these children needed someone who would catch them when they fell. The stairs creaked. Eleanor turned to find Clara standing in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. They looked at each other for a long moment. "I'll set the table," Clara said finally. "Thank you." They worked in silence, moving around each other with new awareness. When Clara reached past Eleanor for the plates, their shoulders brushed. Neither pulled away. The other children filtered down gradually. Ben first, hair sticking up, book tucked under his arm. Then the twins, Samuel yawning, Sarah watching Eleanor with new curiosity. Margaret appeared next, wearing her mended dress, twirling to show Eleanor. Caleb stumbled down last, rubbing his eyes. Jonah returned just as Eleanor was setting the last plate on the table. He washed his hands at the basin, his movements efficient, then took a seat at the head of the table. They ate. The silence was different this morning, less hostile, more tentative, like everyone was trying to figure out the new shape of things. "Miss Wright?" Margaret's voice was small. "Can you teach me the letter Q today?" "We're on Q already?" Margaret nodded seriously. "I know all the way to P." "Then Q it is." "Q is for quilt," Margaret announced, "and queen and quiet." "And quit, which is what you should do before you talk her ear off," Ben said, but there was no bite to it. Margaret stuck her tongue out at him. Samuel snickered. Even Sarah's mouth curved slightly. Jonah cleared his throat. "Ben, you're on irrigation repair today. Clara, I need you to check the fence line in the south pasture." Clara's face lit up. "Really?" "Really. Take Samuel with you. Sarah, you help Miss Wright with the washing. Margaret, you practice your letters. Caleb—" "I want to come with you, Papa," Caleb said immediately. "You're coming with me," Jonah confirmed. He glanced at Eleanor. "That work for you?" It was the first time he'd asked. Eleanor nodded. "Perfectly." After breakfast, the house emptied quickly. Eleanor and Sarah carried the laundry baskets to the creek, the morning sun already warm on their shoulders. Sarah worked in focused silence, scrubbing each piece with fierce concentration. Eleanor watched her from the corner of her eye. The girl was built compact and sturdy like her twin, but where Samuel seemed to bend with the wind, Sarah stood rigid against it. "Your brother's lip healed nicely," Eleanor said casually. Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment. "He falls a lot." "Most 9-year-olds do. Mama used to say he needed to watch where he was going." Eleanor heard the challenge in it. Another test, another comparison. She kept her voice light. "Sounds like sensible advice." She had lots of sensible advice, about everything. Sarah's scrubbing got more aggressive. "She always knew what to do." "I imagine she did." "You don't know what to do. Not really." Eleanor sat back on her heels, studying the girl. Sarah's face was set in stubborn lines, but her eyes betrayed her, angry and scared and grieving all at once. "You're right," Eleanor said. "I don't always know what to do." Sometimes I'm making my best guess. Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. Then why are you here? Because your father needed help, and because sometimes the best thing you can do is show up and try, even when you don't have all the answers. What if you try and fail? Then you try again. Sarah considered this, her hands resuming their scrubbing with less violence. Mama never failed. I bet she did, just maybe not where you could see. You didn't know her. You can't say that. No, I didn't know her, but I know everyone fails sometimes. That's what makes us human. Sarah was quiet for a long time. They worked side by side, the sound of water and fabric filling the space between them. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I spilled ink on her good tablecloth. The week before she got sick, she was angry. I never got to say sorry. Eleanor's chest constricted. She set down the shirt she'd been wringing out and turned to face Sarah fully. She knew you were sorry. How do you know? Because mothers know. They know what's in their children's hearts. Sarah's lower lip trembled. What if she didn't? Then I'll tell you what I believe she would have said, that tablecloths can be replaced, but daughters can't. And you were worth more to her than 1,000 tablecloths. A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. I miss her. I know. It's not fair that you're here and she's not. You're right. It's not fair. The honesty seemed to disarm her. Sarah stared at Eleanor with something like surprise, then returned to her washing. But when they walked back to the house, she carried one of Eleanor's baskets without being asked. The days took on a rhythm. Eleanor woke before dawn, tended the fire, made breakfast. Jonah left for the fields. The children scattered to their tasks. Eleanor worked through her list, washing, mending, cooking, teaching. Every evening they gathered for supper. Every night, Eleanor fell into bed exhausted. But slowly, incrementally, things shifted. Ben started leaving her notes with his books, questions about the stories, thoughts about the characters. Eleanor wrote back, their conversation unfolding in the margins of pages and scraps of paper. Margaret began following Eleanor around the house, chattering about everything and nothing, her earlier wariness replaced by tentative affection. She'd appear at Eleanor's elbow while she was cooking, offering to stir or fetch or taste. Eleanor gave her small tasks and listened to her endless stories about chickens and clouds and the shapes she saw in the wood grain. The twins gradually included Eleanor in their private world. Sarah stopped testing her and started asking her opinion, which dress to wear, how to fix a broken toy, whether Samuel's cough sounded bad. Samuel started seeking Eleanor out when Sarah was occupied elsewhere, as if he was discovering he could exist separately from his twin. Even Caleb, who'd been the most openly affectionate from the start, grew bolder. He started climbing into Eleanor's lap during lessons, falling asleep against her shoulder while she read aloud, reaching for her hand when he was scared of the dark. Clara was different. She didn't soften all at once. But she stopped fighting Eleanor at every turn. She started asking instead of telling, accepting help instead of refusing it, smiling occasionally when she thought no one was looking. One evening, Eleanor found her attempting to let out the seams of her dress, the one that had gotten too small. Her stitches were uneven, her frustration palpable. "May I?" Eleanor asked. Clara handed over the dress without protest. Eleanor examined the fabric, calculating what could be salvaged. "I think I can add some panels here and here, make it last another year at least." "I'm growing too fast. Mama used to say—" Clara stopped, swallowed. "She used to say I was shooting up like a weed." "A very useful weed, then." Clara's mouth quirked. "Is there such a thing?" "Dandelions, chickweed, purslane, all weeds, all useful if you know how to use them." "Did you learn that from your mother?" Eleanor's hands stilled. No one had asked about her past. She'd been grateful for the lack of curiosity, the way they'd let her remain a cipher. "My grandmother, actually. My mother died when I was young." Clara looked up sharply. "How young?" 12. Something changed in Clara's expression. Recognition, maybe. Kinship. "What happened?" "Fever. Like your mother." Eleanor's throat tightened. "She was gone in 4 days." "Did you—" Clara hesitated. "Did you have help?" "After." "My grandmother took me in. She was stern, practical, not warm. but she fed me and taught me to be useful and made sure I survived. Did that help? Being useful? Eleanor considered the question carefully. It gave me something to do besides fall apart. I don't know if that's the same as helping. Clara was quiet for a moment. I think it helps. A little. They sat together as evening deepened, Eleanor stitching while Clara watched. When Eleanor finished, she held up the dress. The additions were subtle, carefully matched. Clara took it, examined the work, then met Eleanor's eyes. Thank you, she said, and this time she meant it. Jonah remained the greatest mystery. He was present but distant, providing for his children with quiet competence but little warmth. He spoke to them about chores and responsibilities, asked after their health, corrected their behavior when necessary. But Eleanor never saw him pull them close, never heard him laugh with them, never caught him being anything other than functional. He was polite to Eleanor, thanking her for meals, asking if she needed anything from town, paying her wages on time. But they barely spoke beyond the necessary logistics of running the household. Until the afternoon, she found him in the barn, standing motionless in front of an empty stall. She'd come to fetch tools for the garden repair. She should have turned around, given him privacy. Instead, she found herself speaking. Mr. Hale? He didn't startle, just turned slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed. This was her favorite place, he said. The barn. She'd come out here when the house got too loud. Said she liked the quiet, the smell of hay and leather. He paused. She died in the house. I haven't been able to stand being in there except when I have to. Eleanor moved closer, carefully. Is that why you're always outside? I keep thinking if I work hard enough, stay busy enough, I won't have time to... His voice cracked. He turned away. The children need me to be strong. They need you to be present. I am present. I provide for them. I keep the ranch running. You keep them alive, Eleanor interrupted gently. But they need more than survival. His shoulders tensed. What would you have me do? Break down in front of them? Show them their father can't handle it? Show them their father is human. That grief doesn't make you weak. He turned to face her fully, and Eleanor saw something raw in his expression. If I let myself feel it, I'll drown. And then who takes care of them? You won't drown. And if you stumble, I'll be there. That's what you hired me for. I hired you to cook and clean, and you hired me to carry what's heavy. That includes this. They stared at each other. Jonah's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. Finally, he exhaled roughly. She was the heart of this place, he said. Everything worked because of her. She made the house a home, made the work feel worthwhile, made me... He stopped. I don't know how to do this without her. You do it one day at a time. One meal, one conversation, one moment of not turning away when it hurts. And if that's not enough, then you do it again tomorrow. Jonah studied her, his gray eyes searching. Why do you care? You could just do your job, keep your distance. Why involve yourself? Eleanor thought about all the ways she could answer, with deflection, with platitudes, with lies. She chose truth instead. Because I know what it's like to be lost. And I know what it's like when no one helps you find your way back. Something shifted in his expression. He nodded once, then reached for the tools she'd come for, handing them to her. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. Thank you, Miss Wright, he said quietly. Eleanor. You can call me Eleanor. He considered this. Eleanor, then. That evening at supper, Jonah asked Ben about his book. Actually listened to the answer. Ben's face lit up, words tumbling out about expeditions and discoveries. Jonah didn't interrupt, didn't rush him, just let his son talk. When Ben finally wound down, Jonah turned to the twins. How's that fence holding up? Good, Sarah said. Samuel found a weak post, though. Smart eye, Jonah said. Samuel beamed. He asked Margaret about her letters, complimented Claire on the rabbit stew, let Caleb show him a rock he'd found. Small things. But the children noticed. Eleanor could see it in the way they sat up straighter, leaned toward their father, smiled more readily. After the meal, after the children had scattered, Jonah lingered at the table. Eleanor washed dishes, aware of his presence behind her. I've been avoiding them, he said finally. Haven't I? Eleanor dried a plate carefully. You've been surviving. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him. Survival is necessary, but eventually you have to do more than just survive. And if I don't know how? You learn, same way they're learning, same way I'm learning. He stood, moved to the window, stared out at the darkening land. She would have known how. She always knew. She's not here, but you are. And that has to be enough. What if it's not? Then you make it enough. You show up anyway. Jonah was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I'm grateful you're here, Eleanor. More than I can properly express. Eleanor's throat tightened. I'm where I need to be. He nodded, collected his hat, and headed for the door. But he paused on the threshold. Tomorrow's Sunday. The children haven't been to church since... Would you go with them? I'm not ready, but they should go. Of course. Thank you. After he left, Eleanor stood alone in the quiet kitchen. Through the ceiling, she could hear footsteps, voices, the sounds of children settling into evening routines. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust and the promise of autumn. She'd been here nearly a month, long enough for the children to stop seeing her as an intruder, long enough for the house to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home, long enough for Eleanor to forget, sometimes, that this was temporary. That night, she lay in bed and let herself imagine staying, really staying, not just until Jonah found someone better or the children didn't need her anymore, but permanently. Building a life here, being part of this fractured family, mattering to someone. Then she remembered the medical report hidden in her drawer, the truth she was keeping, the inevitable moment when Jonah would want more children and she'd have to confess she could never give them to him. The fantasy dissolved. Eleanor closed her eyes and reminded herself what she'd known from the beginning. This was borrowed time. Enjoy it while it lasted, but don't mistake it for permanence. Outside, that same lonely coyote called into the darkness. Eleanor listened until she fell asleep. Sunday morning came bright and cold. Eleanor helped the children into their church clothes. Dresses for the girls, pressed shirts for the boys. Clara had clearly been managing this task alone for months, and the results showed. Hems were uneven, buttons mismatched, stains imperfectly removed. We look like scarecrows, Clara muttered, trying to smooth Margaret's wild curls. You look like children who've been doing the best they can, Eleanor said firmly. Which is exactly what you are. At the church, heads turned when they entered. Eleanor felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers start. The new woman, the housekeeper, working for that poor Hale family. They found a pew near the back. The children sat in order, Clara, Ben, the twins, Margaret, Caleb. Eleanor took the end seat, Caleb pressed against her side. The service passed in a blur of hymns and scripture. Eleanor barely heard it. She was too aware of the children beside her, too conscious of the congregation's attention. When it finally ended, several women descended. You must be the woman Jonah hired, one said, her smile bright and sharp. Such a blessing for those poor children. We've been praying for that family, another added. Tragic what they've been through. Eleanor smiled tightly and shepherded the children toward the door, but a hand on her arm stopped her. Miss Wright, I'm Sarah Brennan. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She turned slowly. The woman facing her was beautiful, blonde, delicate, perfectly dressed. 3 children clung to her skirts. Her smile was genuine, her eyes kind. I heard someone had finally answered Jonah's advertisement, Sarah continued. I'm so glad. Those children need... She stopped, studying Eleanor more closely. Her expression shifted to confusion, then recognition. Eleanor? Eleanor Wright? Eleanor couldn't breathe. Sarah, I didn't... Thomas said you'd gone east. I had no idea you were here. Sarah's eyes went to the children, then back to Eleanor. You're working for the Hales? Yes. That's wonderful. Really, it's... Sarah seemed genuinely pleased. Those children deserve someone kind, someone who'll care for them properly. Eleanor wanted to hate her. She'd tried for years to hate her. But Sarah had never been cruel, never gloated, never done anything except exist as the woman who could give Thomas what Eleanor couldn't. How are you? Sarah asked. Are you well? I'm fine. And Thomas? He's well. We have 3 children now. Life's been good to us. Sarah hesitated. I'm sorry, Eleanor, for how things ended. I always felt... Don't, Eleanor said quietly. Please. Sarah nodded, squeezed Eleanor's arm gently, then moved away. Eleanor stood frozen until Clara touched her elbow. Miss Wright, are you all right? Eleanor forced herself to smile. I'm fine. Let's go home. The ride back to the ranch was silent except for the creak of the wagon wheels and Margaret's soft humming. Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, willing her hands to stop shaking. Clara watched her with that sharp, assessing gaze that missed nothing. When they arrived, the children scattered to their Sunday routines. Eleanor headed straight for the kitchen, needing work to quiet her mind. She was elbow-deep in bread dough when Clara appeared in the doorway. Who was that woman? Clara asked without preamble. Eleanor's hands stilled. Someone I used to know. She knew your name. You looked like you'd seen a ghost. It's nothing that concerns you. Everything that happens in this house concerns me. Clara crossed her arms. You looked upset. Are you upset? Eleanor resumed kneading, pressing her palms into the dough with more force than necessary. Just surprised. I didn't expect to see anyone from my old life. What old life? The question hung in the air. Eleanor could deflect again, shut down the conversation, maintain the distance she'd been so careful to preserve. But Clara was looking at her with something like concern, and Eleanor found she didn't have the energy to keep lying. I grew up 2 territories east of here, Eleanor said quietly. Small town. Everyone knew everyone. I was engaged once to a banker's son. When it ended, staying there became difficult. So I left. Clara processed this. Why did it end? Eleanor's throat tightened. Because I couldn't give him what he needed. What did he need? A normal life. A normal wife. Eleanor shaped the dough into a round, her movements mechanical. Someone who could be what I can't be. Clara was quiet for a moment. The woman at church. She's who he married instead? Yes. She seemed nice. She is nice. That's the worst part. Eleanor covered the dough and turned to face Clara. It would be easier if she were terrible. But she's kind and good, and everything a wife should be. And You're here, Clara interrupted. You're with us. That counts for something. Eleanor's eyes stung. She blinked hard. It counts for now, but eventually your father will want to remarry properly, have more children, build a real family, and I'll have to... You are real family, Clara's voice was fierce. You think we don't notice? You think we can't tell the difference between someone who's just doing a job and someone who actually cares? Clara, no, listen. When Mama died, people came around for a while. Brought casseroles and sympathy and stayed just long enough to feel like they'd done their Christian duty. Then they left, and we were alone trying to figure out how to keep living. You didn't do that. You stayed. You're still here. Eleanor couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. So I don't care about your old life, or who married who, or what you think you can't be, Clara continued. You're here now. That's what matters. Before Eleanor could respond, Clara turned and walked out. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands, tears she wouldn't allow threatening to fall. The afternoon passed in forced normalcy. Eleanor cooked, cleaned, helped Samuel with arithmetic, but her mind kept circling back to Sarah's kind eyes, Thomas's phantom presence, the life she'd left behind and thought she'd outrun. She was hanging laundry when Jonah found her. The children said church went well, he said, leaning against the fence post. It was fine. Just fine? Eleanor clipped a sheet to the line with more force than necessary. We attended. We came home. Nothing remarkable. Jonah was quiet for a moment. Clara said you ran into someone you knew. Clara talks too much. Clara's worried about you. Eleanor turned to face him. There's nothing to worry about. I saw someone from my past. It was uncomfortable. It's over. Is it? The gentle question undid something in her. Eleanor set down the laundry basket and pressed her palms to her eyes. I thought I'd left all that behind, thought if I came far enough west, I could become someone new, someone without a history. Doesn't work that way. No, apparently it doesn't. Jonah moved closer. You want to talk about it? Eleanor laughed, the sound hollow. What's there to say? I was engaged. It ended badly. I ran away. Same tired story everyone has. Why did it end? She looked at him sharply, but his expression was genuinely curious, not prying. She thought about deflecting again. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. Because I'm broken. In a way that matters to most men. In a way that makes me insufficient. Jonah frowned. Insufficient how? Eleanor hesitated. She'd never said it aloud to anyone except Thomas and the doctor. The words felt jagged in her throat. I can't have children. My body doesn't work the way it should. The doctors were very clear about that. She waited for his expression to change, for the kindness to drain from his eyes and be replaced by disappointment or pity or calculation about when he'd need to replace her. Instead, Jonah just nodded slowly. And your fiancé ended things because of that? Of course he did. A man needs sons. A wife who can't provide them is no wife at all. That's horseshit. Eleanor blinked. Excuse me? Your fiancé was a coward and a fool. Jonah's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. You dodged a bullet there. He wasn't. He had every right to want a family. I couldn't give him that. He had a chance at a family, with you. He threw it away because you couldn't give him something specific. That's not love. That's transaction. Eleanor stared at him. You don't understand. In my town, a woman's value is measured by, I don't give a damn what your town measured. You're here now, and here your value is measured by whether you show up and do right by the people who need you, which you do. Every damn day. Something cracked open in Eleanor's chest. You say that now, but eventually you'll want to remarry, have more children, and I can't. I have 6 children, Jonah interrupted. 6 reasons to get up every morning, 6 people who need more than I know how to give. I'm not looking to add to that burden, and I'm sure as hell not looking to replace you with someone who can give me more mouths to feed. You say that now. I say that because it's true. He held her gaze. You think you're broken. I've been walking around half dead for 2 years. You think you're insufficient? I couldn't even look my own children in the eye until you showed me how. We're all broken here, Eleanor. The question isn't whether we're damaged, it's whether we're willing to keep trying anyway. Eleanor couldn't breathe. Why are you saying this? Because you look like you're planning to run, and I'm asking you not to. I'm not. You are. I can see it in your eyes. That woman at church rattled you, reminded you of all the reasons you think you don't belong anywhere, and now you're calculating how long you can hold on before you have to leave. He was right. Eleanor felt exposed, seen in a way that terrified her. I don't want to hurt these children. When you find someone better, there is no one better. There's just you, and that's enough. It has to be enough because I don't know what we'd do without you now. The words hung between them. Eleanor searched his face for deception, for politeness masking obligation. She found only honesty. I'm afraid, she whispered, of staying, of mattering too much, of losing this when it inevitably falls apart. Then we'll be afraid together. Jonah's voice was gentle. But we'll stay anyway. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. Jonah held her gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward the barn. Eleanor stood among the laundry, the wind catching the sheets, her heart pounding with something she couldn't name. That evening, Margaret came down with a fever. It started small, a complaint that her throat hurt, a lack of appetite at supper. By bedtime, she was flushed and glassy-eyed. By midnight, she was burning up. Eleanor sat beside her bed, bathing her forehead with cool cloths while the little girl tossed and whimpered. Downstairs, she could hear Jonah pacing. The other children had been sent to bed, but she doubted any of them were sleeping. Miss Wright? Margaret's voice was hoarse. Am I going to die like Mama? Eleanor's heart clenched. No, sweetheart. You have a fever. Fevers break. Mama had a fever. I know, but yours is different. You're going to be fine. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. It hurts. I know it does. But I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. The night stretched endlessly. Eleanor changed cool cloths, coaxed water between Margaret's cracked lips, sang soft songs she half remembered from her own childhood. Every time Margaret's temperature spiked, Eleanor's chest constricted with fear she refused to show. Around 3 a.m, Jonah appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard, his hair standing on end from running his hands through it. How is she? He asked quietly. Fever's holding steady, not getting worse, but not breaking yet. He moved closer, looking down at his daughter's flushed face. Something in his expression cracked. When my wife got sick, it happened so fast. One day she was fine. 3 days later, she was gone. I kept thinking if I just watched close enough, fought hard enough, I could keep death away. But I couldn't. Eleanor stood, touched his arm gently. Margaret's not Sarah. This fever is going to break. How do you know? Because I'm not letting it take her. Neither are you. We're going to sit here and fight for her until there's nothing left to fight. Jonah's eyes were wet. What if it's not enough? Then we'll have done everything we could, but it will be enough. She's strong. She's a Hale. He nodded, sank into the chair Eleanor had vacated. You should rest. I'll take over. We'll do it together. They sat on opposite sides of Margaret's bed through the darkest hours of the night. Jonah held his daughter's hand. Eleanor kept the cool cloths coming, monitored her breathing, refused to let fear win. Around dawn, Margaret's fever broke. The change was subtle. Her restless tossing calmed, her breathing evened out, the terrifying heat receded. Eleanor checked her temperature 3 times to be sure before she let herself believe it. She's through it, Eleanor whispered. Jonah's shoulders sagged with relief so profound it seemed to age him. He pressed his face to Margaret's small hand and his shoulders shook. Eleanor looked away, giving him privacy for his tears. When he finally raised his head, his eyes were red but clear. Thank you, he said hoarsely. I didn't do anything. She fought it herself. You stayed. That's not nothing. Margaret stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Papa? I'm here, sweetheart. Is Miss Wright here too? Right beside you, Eleanor said. Margaret's mouth curved into a weak smile. I knew you wouldn't leave. Eleanor's throat closed. Never. Margaret fell back into sleep, this time peaceful and natural. Jonah stood stiffly, his joints protesting the long night in the chair. The others will be awake soon, he said. They'll want to see she's all right. I'll make breakfast. You stay with her? Eleanor? He caught her hand as she moved past. What you said about fighting for her, about not letting death win. You meant it. Every word. He squeezed her hand once, then released it. Eleanor descended the stairs on shaking legs, exhaustion and relief making her clumsy. In the kitchen, she found all 5 other children huddled around the table, waiting. She's all right, Eleanor said immediately. The fever broke. She's sleeping now. The tension released like a snapped cord. Clara burst into tears. Ben sagged against the wall. The twins grabbed each other. Caleb ran to Eleanor and wrapped his arms around her waist. I was so scared, he said into her skirt. I know, little one, but she's strong, like all of you. Clara wiped her eyes roughly. Can we see her? Let her sleep a bit longer. She needs rest to fully recover, but yes, soon. They ate breakfast in near silence, exhaustion and relief making them slow. Afterward, Eleanor sent them out to their morning chores, knowing they needed normalcy more than they needed to hover. Only Clara remained. You were up all night, Clara said. Your father and I took turns. No, you didn't. I heard you. You never left her room. Eleanor didn't argue. She needed someone. You could have woken me. I would have helped. You need your rest, and you've carried enough night terrors for one lifetime. Clara's expression softened. So have you, I think. Eleanor managed a tired smile. Maybe. But what else can we do except keep showing up? Is that what you're doing? Showing up? Trying to. Some days better than others. Clara studied her for a long moment. I'm glad you came here, Miss Wright. Even if you don't think you were the right choice, I'm glad it was you. Before Eleanor could respond, Clara left. Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, bone-tired and heartful and more terrified than she'd ever been of how much she'd come to care for these broken, beautiful people. Margaret recovered slowly over the next week. She was weak and clingy, wanting Eleanor or Jonah within sight at all times. Eleanor slept in a chair beside her bed for 3 nights until Jonah ordered her to her own room and took over the vigil himself. The near loss changed something in the household. The children moved closer to each other, to Eleanor, to their father. Jonah stopped retreating to the barn every evening, instead sitting with them after supper, reading aloud, or just being present. The silences grew comfortable instead of hollow. One evening, Ben shyly showed Jonah the notes he and Eleanor had been exchanging about books. Jonah read them carefully, then asked Ben questions that made the boy's face light up. Sarah started setting the table without being asked, arranging things the way Eleanor had taught her. Samuel began leaving small gifts for Margaret, smooth rocks, pretty leaves, a carved wooden horse he'd made. Even Clara softened further. She started asking Eleanor to teach her more complicated sewing techniques, sitting beside her in the evenings while Eleanor worked on mending. They talked quietly about small things, the garden, the weather, Margaret's recovery. But underneath ran a deeper current, an understanding that they were building something fragile and precious. 2 weeks after Margaret's fever broke, Eleanor was kneading bread when Jonah came in from the fields earlier than usual. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Need to talk to you, when you have a moment." Eleanor's stomach dropped. This was it. He'd realized he didn't need her anymore, or he'd found someone better, or he was tired of paying wages for work his daughters could do. She wiped her hands on her apron. "I have a moment now." He gestured to the table. They sat across from each other, the scarred wood between them. "I've been thinking," Jonah said slowly, "about your arrangement here, about what makes sense going forward." Eleanor braced herself. "I understand. You've been more than fair. If you need me to stay until you find someone else, that's not what I'm saying." She stopped, confused. Jonah ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "The children have gotten attached to you. Hell, I've gotten used to having you here. The house works better. Everything works better. And I don't want to disrupt that." "I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking if you'd consider making this permanent, not as hired help, as family." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Marriage, in name anyway." He held up a hand before she could speak. "I'm not asking for romance or intimacy. I'm asking for partnership. You keep doing what you're doing. I keep the ranch running. We raise the children together, give them stability, give ourselves—" He paused. "Give ourselves something to build on that isn't just survival." Eleanor stared at him. "You want to marry me? I want to give you a real place here, not as the housekeeper who could leave any time, as my wife, the children's mother, someone who belongs." "But I can't give you children. You know that. I know, and I don't care. I have children. What I need is a partner, someone who won't run when things get hard, someone the children trust, someone I trust." Eleanor's mind reeled. "This is insane." "Probably, but so is most of life out here. People will talk. Let them talk. You could find someone who could give you everything, someone whole." "You are whole, Kate." Jonah's voice was firm. "And I don't want someone else. I want you. This version, right here, exactly as you are." Eleanor felt tears threaten. "Why?" "Because you show up. Because you stayed when Margaret was sick. Because my children smile again. Because when I look at you, I don't see what's missing. I see what's there." "That's not love." "No, but it's respect and trust. And maybe that's enough foundation to build on." Eleanor thought about Thomas, who'd claimed to love her but left when she couldn't be what he needed. Then she thought about Jonah, who wasn't offering love but was offering something maybe more valuable: acceptance, a place to belong, the right to stay. "What about you?" she asked quietly. "What do you get from this?" "Peace, help, someone to share the burden with." He paused. "And maybe, eventually, companionship, if we're both willing." "You're asking me to marry you for practical reasons." "Yes." "That's the most honest proposal I've ever heard." His mouth quirked. "I try." Eleanor looked around the kitchen, at the table where the children ate, the fireplace where Caleb sat for stories, the window where morning light streamed in. She thought about Clara's fierce loyalty, Ben's shy trust, Margaret's hand reaching for hers in the dark. She thought about the life she could have here if she was brave enough to claim it. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "of wanting this too much, of believing it could work." "Then we'll be afraid together, but say yes anyway." Eleanor met his eyes, saw honesty there and hope and a fragile belief that maybe they could build something good from all these broken pieces. "Yes," she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Jonah's shoulders dropped with relief. Thank you. When? As soon as we can arrange it. No point waiting. The children will be thrilled. Trust me. They sat in the quiet kitchen, the magnitude of the decision settling between them. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't passionate declarations or romantic promises. It was two damaged people choosing to build something together because alone was too hard, and this partnership made sense. One condition, Eleanor said. Anything. You have to tell them, the children. They deserve to hear it from you, Jonah nodded. Tonight, at supper. That evening, after the meal was finished, but before anyone could leave the table, Jonah cleared his throat. I have something to tell you all, something important. 6 faces turned toward him. Clara's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I've asked Miss Wright, Eleanor, to marry me, and she's agreed. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Margaret squealed and launched herself at Eleanor, nearly knocking over her chair. Caleb followed immediately, wrapping his small arms around Eleanor's waist. The twins exchanged wide-eyed looks, then Sarah smiled tentatively while Samuel's grin split his face. Ben sat frozen, his expression carefully neutral. And Clara stared at her father with something Eleanor couldn't quite read. Does this mean Miss Wright will be our new mama? Margaret asked, her voice muffled against Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor's breath caught. She looked helplessly at Jonah. It means she'll be my wife, Jonah said carefully. And she'll be here permanently, part of this family. What you call her is up to you and her to figure out. But Mama, Clara's voice cut through the excitement like a blade. We already have a mama. The room went silent. Margaret pulled back from Eleanor, suddenly uncertain. Caleb's grip loosened. Even the twins seemed to hold their breath. You do have a mama, Eleanor said quietly, meeting Clara's eyes. And nothing about this changes that. Your mother will always be your mother. I'm not here to replace her, or erase her, or pretend she didn't exist. Then what are you here for? Clara's voice shook. Eleanor chose her words carefully. I'm here to love you, to take care of you, to be someone you can count on. But I'll never ask you to forget her or stop missing her. She was yours first. She'll always be yours. Clara's jaw trembled. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. May I be excused? Jonah nodded, his expression pained. Clara fled up the stairs. The sound of her door closing echoed through the house. Margaret looked between Eleanor and the stairs, torn. Is Clara mad? Clara's feeling a lot of things right now, Eleanor said. And that's all right. This is big news. Everyone needs time to sort through it. I think it's good news, Samuel offered quietly. You being here forever, I mean. Me too, Sarah added, though her voice was uncertain. Ben finally spoke, his tone measured. When's the wedding? Jonah glanced at Eleanor. Soon, we're thinking next Sunday. Keep it simple. Just family and maybe a few witnesses. That's fast, Ben observed. No point in waiting, Jonah said. We've all been living together already. This just makes it official. Will there be cake? Caleb asked, his priorities clear. Despite the tension, Eleanor smiled. Yes, little one, there will be cake. The conversation gradually shifted to logistics, what Eleanor would wear, whether they'd have a celebration, if people from town would come. Eleanor answered questions mechanically, but her attention kept drifting to the stairs, to Clara's closed door, to the weight of what they'd just set in motion. After the children had been sent to bed, Caleb and Margaret reluctantly, the twins thoughtfully, Ben with a quiet congratulations, Eleanor and Jonah remained at the table. That went better than I expected, Jonah said. Did it? Your oldest daughter just ran from the room. Clara's been the woman of the house for 2 years. This is threatening to her. She'll come around. Will she? Eleanor twisted her hands in her lap. Maybe we should wait. Give her more time to adjust. We could wait a year and she'd still struggle with this. The question isn't whether it's easy, it's whether it's right. Eleanor wanted to believe him, but the look on Clara's face haunted her. I should talk to her, Eleanor said. Tonight? She won't sleep anyway. Neither will I if I don't try. Jonah nodded. Good luck. Eleanor climbed the stairs slowly, her heart hammering. She knocked softly on Clara's door. Go away. It's me. Can I come in? A long pause, then grudgingly, "Fine." Eleanor opened the door. Clara sat on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, face blotchy from crying. She looked young and fierce and heartbroken all at once. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, careful to leave space between them. "I know this is hard. You don't know anything." "You're right. I don't know what it's like to lose a mother at 12 and have to become one yourself. I don't know what it's like to watch your father marry someone new. But I do know what it's like to feel like everything's changing too fast and you can't control any of it." Clara's walls cracked slightly. "Why are you marrying him?" "Because he asked, and because I want to stay here with all of you, and this makes that possible." "Do you love him?" The blunt question caught Eleanor off guard. "I respect him. I trust him. I think we could build something good together." "That's not the same as love." "No, it's not. But maybe it's more honest." Clara wiped her eyes roughly. "Did he love Mama?" "I think he did. Very much." "Then how can he marry you if he doesn't love you? Isn't that betraying her?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I don't think your father's trying to replace your mother. I think he's trying to keep living, and sometimes that means making choices that don't fit the story we thought we'd have." "But what if he does fall in love with you? What if you take her place in his heart?" There it was, the real fear. Eleanor reached out slowly and took Clara's hand. "Hearts don't work like that. Love isn't a finite resource. Your father loved your mother. That doesn't disappear just because he cares for someone else now. And you have enough heart for all the people who love you, past and present. One doesn't erase the other." Clara's fingers tightened around Eleanor's. "I don't want to forget her." "Then don't. Talk about her. Remember her. Keep her alive in the stories you tell. I'll help you, I promise." "Why would you do that?" "Most women would want to pretend the first wife never existed. I'm not most women. And your mother, she made you who you are. All of you. I'm grateful to her for that, even though I never met her." Clara stared at her, tears streaming freely now. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of liking you too much. Of forgetting it's supposed to hurt. Of being happy when I should still be sad." Eleanor pulled her close, and this time Clara came willingly, burying her face in Eleanor's shoulder. "You're allowed to be happy and sad at the same time. You're allowed to grieve your mother and still build a life. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "It feels wrong." "I know, but your mother wouldn't want you frozen in grief forever. She'd want you to keep living, keep growing, keep being Clara." They sat together as Clara cried herself out. When the tears finally subsided, Clara pulled back, her face red and puffy. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said quietly. "Anything." "Do you want to be our mother?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I want to be someone who loves you and takes care of you and is there when you need me. Whether that makes me a mother in your eyes is up to you. I won't force a title, but I will show up, every day, for as long as you'll have me." Clara nodded slowly. I think I can live with that." "That's all I'm asking." Clara managed a watery smile. "You're not what I expected when Papa said he was bringing someone home." "Is that good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm glad it's you and not someone else." Eleanor's chest ached with affection and relief. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be busy." "Eleanor?" Clara caught her hand as she stood. "Thank you. For not trying to be her. For being yourself instead." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Always." She left Clara's room with lighter steps, the weight of dread replaced by cautious hope. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Ben. "Is she all right?" he asked quietly. "She will be." "Are you?" Ben shrugged, the gesture adolescent and uncertain. "I guess. It's weird, but not bad weird, just different." "Different how?" "Having someone who wants to stay. Most people don't stick around once things get hard." Eleanor's heart broke a little. "I'm not going anywhere." "People say that, but then they leave anyway." "Not me. You're stuck with me now, official and everything." Ben almost smiled. "Okay, good." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think Papa made a good choice. You're steady. He needs that. We all do." "Thank you, Ben." That means more than you know." He nodded and disappeared into his room. Eleanor stood in the dark hallway, overwhelmed by the fragile trust these children were placing in her. She couldn't fail them. Wouldn't fail them. Whatever it took to make this work, she'd find a way. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Eleanor sewed herself a simple dress, nothing fancy, just clean lines and deep blue fabric she'd had tucked away. The children helped with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Margaret insisted on picking wildflowers for a bouquet. The twins argued over who would stand where during the ceremony. Caleb practiced walking in a straight line, certain he'd been assigned some important role no one had actually given him. Clara remained reserved but no longer hostile. She helped Eleanor with the dress alterations, her stitches neat and precise. They worked in companionable silence, occasionally exchanging small observations about thread tension or hem length. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it wasn't ice either. Jonah handled the practical arrangements, securing a minister, filing paperwork in town, informing the few neighbors who needed to know. He was efficient and methodical, treating the wedding like any other ranch business. Eleanor tried not to think too hard about what that meant. The night before the wedding, Eleanor lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd move into Jonah's room, the room he'd shared with his first wife. He'd offered to sleep elsewhere if it made her uncomfortable, but Eleanor had refused. They were building a partnership, not maintaining a charade. Separate rooms defeated the purpose. Still, the thought of sharing that space, of seeing his vulnerability in sleep, of the inevitable intimacy even a practical marriage required, it terrified her. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. "Eleanor, you awake?" She sat up. "Clara?" The door opened. Clara stood in her nightgown, silhouetted by lamplight from the hall. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Clara entered and sat on the edge of the bed. In her hands, she held a small wooden box. "I wanted to give you something, before tomorrow." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." Clara opened the box. Inside lay a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. "This was Mama's. Papa gave it to her when they got married. She wore it every day until she couldn't anymore." Eleanor couldn't breathe. "Clara, I can't take this. It should be yours." "She would have wanted you to have it. Clara's voice wavered. She always said marriage was about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. You've been choosing us. Over and over. This is me choosing you back." Eleanor's vision blurred. "This is the most precious thing you could give me." "I know. That's why I'm giving it." Clara lifted the locket from the box and fastened it around Eleanor's neck. The silver was warm from Clara's hands. "There. Now you're really part of us." Eleanor pulled Clara into a fierce hug. "Thank you. I'll treasure this. I promise." Clara hugged her back just as tightly. When they pulled apart, both were crying and smiling at the same time. "You should sleep," Clara said, wiping her eyes. "Big day tomorrow." "You too." Clara paused at the door. "Eleanor, I'm glad Papa chose you, in case I haven't said that clearly enough." "You have, but I'm glad to hear it again." After Clara left, Eleanor touched the locket at her throat. Inside, she knew, were likely photographs of people she'd never meet, Jonah's first wife, perhaps the children when they were younger. She was marrying into a history that existed before her, carrying the weight of a woman whose shoes she could never fill. But maybe that was the point. She wasn't filling shoes. She was walking her own path beside theirs, building something new from the pieces of what had broken. Morning came too quickly. Eleanor dressed with shaking hands, Clara helping with the buttons down her back. Margaret braided Eleanor's hair with clumsy fingers, and Sarah tucked wildflowers into the plait. The twins argued over whether Eleanor needed jewelry beyond the locket. Ben offered her his arm to walk down the stairs as if she were already the lady of the house. The ceremony itself was simple. The minister was a weathered man who'd clearly conducted his share of practical frontier marriages. A few neighbors served as witnesses, ranchers and their wives who'd known Jonah for years. Sarah Brennan was there, her expression kind and free of judgment. Eleanor met her eyes once and found only genuine happiness reflected back. Jonah wore his best shirt and a clean pair of trousers. He'd shaved and combed his hair, and when Eleanor appeared, something softened in his expression. He offered his hand, and she took it, his grip steady and sure. The minister's words washed over her in a blur. She heard herself say, "I do," at the appropriate moment. Heard Jonah's deeper voice echo the same commitment. Then he was sliding a simple gold band onto her finger. Nothing ornate, just solid and real and permanent. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said. Jonah looked at Eleanor, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. He leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, brief and chaste, and somehow momentous anyway. When he pulled back, Eleanor's heart was racing. The children erupted in cheers. Margaret threw flower petals she'd been saving. Caleb shouted, "Hooray!" at the top of his lungs. Even Clara smiled, genuine and wide. They celebrated with cake and coffee, the neighbors offering congratulations before drifting away to their own lives. Soon only the family remained, gathered in the house that was now officially Eleanor's home. "Well, Mrs. Hale," Jonah said quietly, "how does it feel?" Eleanor looked around at the children, her children now, in the eyes of the law and the community. Terrifying and right. Good combination. That night, after the children were asleep, Eleanor stood in the doorway of Jonah's room, their room now. He was already inside, hanging his good shirt carefully. "You can take the dresser on the left," he said without turning around. "I cleared out the drawers." Eleanor moved her few belongings from her carpet bag into the dresser, hyper-aware of Jonah's presence. When she finished, she stood awkwardly, unsure what came next. Jonah seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll sleep on top of the covers. You take the bed proper. We'll figure out the rest as we go." "You don't have to say—" "I know, but I am." He met her eyes. "This is already a lot of change. No need to rush the rest." Eleanor nodded, grateful beyond words. They prepared for bed with careful courtesy, neither looking directly at the other. When Eleanor finally lay down, the mattress was softer than her old one, the pillow still holding the faint scent of lavender. Jonah settled on top of the quilt beside her, leaving a careful space between them. The lamp flickered out. In the darkness, Eleanor could hear his breathing, feel the warmth of his presence. "Eleanor?" His voice was soft. "Yes?" "Thank you for saying yes, for staying, for all of it." "Thank you for asking." They lay in silence for a while. Then Jonah's hand found hers in the dark, his calloused fingers linking with hers. Eleanor squeezed back. It wasn't passion, it wasn't romance, but it was connection, freely chosen and mutually given. And for now, that was enough. The days after the wedding settled into new rhythms. Eleanor moved through the house with different authority now, not as hired help, but as its mistress. The children tested the boundaries of this new reality in small ways. Margaret started calling her Mama Eleanor when she thought no one was listening. The twins brought their disputes to her for arbitration. Ben asked her opinion on things that mattered to him. Even Caleb, who'd never known reserve with her, seemed to relax further, certain now that she wouldn't disappear. Clara remained the most complicated. She never called Eleanor anything but Eleanor, maintaining a formal distance even as she sought her company. They fell into a pattern of working together in the evenings. Clara on her mending, Eleanor on hers, occasional conversation flowing between comfortable silences. Jonah was careful with Eleanor, respectful to the point of distance. They shared a bed now, but he kept to his side, never presuming. They spoke about the ranch, the children, practical matters. They didn't speak about what their marriage was becoming or might become. Eleanor told herself she was grateful for the space. She refused to examine why it sometimes felt lonely. 3 weeks after the wedding, Eleanor was in the henhouse collecting eggs when she heard wagon wheels. She emerged to find a well-dressed couple climbing down. A man in an expensive suit and a woman in traveling clothes too fine for ranch visiting. Jonah appeared from the barn, his expression shuddering immediately. "Richard, Constance, what brings you out here?" The woman, Constance, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can't we visit my late sister's family without an inquisition?" Eleanor's stomach dropped. Sarah's sister, Jonah's first wife's sister. "You're always welcome," Jonah said carefully. "I just wasn't expecting you." Clearly, Constance's gaze landed on Eleanor, assessing and finding her wanting in a single glance. "And you must be the new wife. How convenient that Jonah found a replacement so quickly." Eleanor kept her expression neutral. "Eleanor Hale. Pleased to meet you." "I'm sure." Constance's smile was razor sharp. Though I must say, Sarah's barely been gone 2 years. Seems rather hasty, don't you think? Constance, Jonah's voice held a warning. What? I'm simply observing that my sister deserves to be mourned properly, not replaced at the first opportunity. Richard put a hand on his wife's arm. We came to see the children, remember? Of course. Where are my darling nieces and nephews? I've brought gifts. The children had heard the wagon and came running. Constance embraced each of them with dramatic affection, exclaiming over how much they'd grown. The gifts appeared, dolls for the girls, books for the boys, expensive things that made Jonah's jaw tighten. Can we offer you lunch? Eleanor asked, playing the hostess even as everything in her wanted to retreat. That would be lovely, Richard said quickly, before his wife could refuse. Eleanor prepared the meal while Constance held court in the main room, regaling the children with stories of their mother. Eleanor could hear every word from the kitchen, each memory a small blade. Your mother had the most beautiful singing voice. Do you remember? She made the best preserves. I still have jars she gave me the summer before she passed. She always said family was everything. She would be so heartbroken to see strangers in her home. Clara appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face tight. You don't have to listen to this. Yes, I do. She's your aunt. She loved your mother. She's allowed to grieve. She's being cruel. Perhaps, but I can take it. Eleanor carried plates to the table. Come, let's eat. The meal was excruciating. Constance peppered Eleanor with questions designed to highlight her inadequacy. Can Peaches like Sarah had? Did she know Sarah's special recipe for cornbread? Had she seen the beautiful quilts Sarah had made? Eleanor answered with patience she didn't feel, refusing to rise to the bait. Jonah's expression grew darker with each exchange, but Eleanor caught his eye and shook her head slightly. This was a battle she had to fight herself. After lunch, Constance requested a tour of the house. Eleanor obliged, walking her through rooms while Constance pointed out everything Sarah had done. The curtains she'd sewn, the furniture she'd arranged, the marks she'd left everywhere. In the bedroom, Eleanor's bedroom now, Constance stopped at the dresser, her hand touching the locket at Eleanor's throat. That was Sarah's. Clara gave it to me as a wedding gift. Clara had no right. That should stay in the family. I am family now. Constance's eyes flashed. You're a stranger playing house with my sister's children. You'll never be their mother. You'll never be what Sarah was to them. Eleanor met her gaze steadily. You're absolutely right. I'll never be Sarah. I don't want to be. But I am their family now, whether you accept that or not, and I'll love them and care for them every day for the rest of my life. Love? Constance laughed bitterly. You married a man you barely know for security and a roof over your head. Don't pretend this is about love. I never said it was. I said it was about showing up, about being there, about choosing them every day. That's what I promised, and that's what I'll do. They stared at each other, two women defending different versions of the same family. Finally, Constance looked away. Sarah deserved better than to be forgotten. She hasn't been forgotten. She's talked about every day. Her memory lives in these children, in this house, in your heart. Eleanor's voice softened. I'm not trying to erase her. I'm just trying to help them keep living. Constance's composure cracked slightly. She was my little sister. I was supposed to protect her. You couldn't have prevented the fever. I should have been here, should have helped more when she was alive, should have... Her voice broke. Eleanor did something she hadn't planned. She reached out and took Constance's hand. You can help now, by supporting these children, by being their aunt, by keeping Sarah's memory alive for them. That's what she would want. Constance pulled away, but something in her expression had shifted. I don't like you. I know. But Clara gave you that locket, and Clara's judgment is usually sound. She is her mother's daughter. Constance almost smiled. Yes, she is. She straightened her shoulders. We should go. Richard has business in town before dark. They said their goodbyes with stiff courtesy. As the wagon pulled away, Jonah appeared beside Eleanor. That was well handled, he said quietly. She's grieving, and she's right about some things. I am a replacement of sorts. No, you're not. Jonah turned her to face him. You're not replacing anyone. You're building something new. There's a difference. Eleanor wanted to believe him. Your children will always love their mother. Yes, and they can love you too. It's not an either-or proposition. Constance doesn't think so. Constance is scared. Scared that if the children move on, Sarah really will be gone. But that's not how memory works. Sarah lives in them regardless of whether they stay frozen in grief. Eleanor nodded, exhausted. Jonah pulled her close, and she let herself lean against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. We're going to be all right, he said. All of us. Eleanor closed her eyes and chose to believe him. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay beside Jonah, listening to his even breathing, her mind replaying Constance's words. You'll never be what Sarah was to them. The truth of it sat heavy on her chest. She would always be the second wife, the woman who came after, the one who hadn't been chosen for love but for necessity. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Jonah, and padded downstairs. The kitchen was dark and cool, moonlight streaming through the windows. She put water on for tea and stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around the warmth of the kettle. Can't sleep either? Eleanor turned to find Clara in the doorway, wrapped in a quilt. I didn't mean to wake you, Eleanor said. You didn't. I heard Aunt Constance's voice in my head and couldn't shut it off. Clara joined her at the counter. She was awful to you today. She's grieving. That doesn't give her the right to be cruel. Clara's voice was fierce. What she said about you being a stranger, that was wrong. You're not a stranger. Not anymore. Eleanor's throat tightened. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. Clara hesitated, then added quietly, I've been thinking about what Aunt Constance said, about Mama deserving to be mourned properly. And I realized, I don't know if I have been, mourning her, I mean. I've been so busy trying to hold everything together, I never let myself just feel it. Eleanor poured tea for both of them, then gestured to the table. They sat across from each other, steam rising between them. Tell me about her, Eleanor said. Your mother. Not the perfect memory everyone holds up. The real her. Clara looked surprised. Why do you want to know? Because she made you. All of you. And because I want to understand the woman whose home I'm living in, whose children I'm raising, whose husband I married. Clara wrapped her hands around her cup, her expression distant. She wasn't perfect. People act like she was, but she wasn't. She had a temper sometimes. She could be stubborn. She hated doing laundry and would put it off until we were all running out of clean clothes. Eleanor smiled. What else? She sang all the time, but she was terrible at it. Papa used to tease her about it, and she'd sing louder just to annoy him. She made the best apple pie I've ever tasted, but her biscuits were like rocks. She tried to teach me to sew, and we'd both end up frustrated because I couldn't get the stitches right. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She used to braid my hair every morning, and she'd tell me I was going to be beautiful and strong and that I shouldn't let anyone tell me otherwise. She was right, Eleanor said softly. I miss her so much. Clara's voice broke. I miss her hands in my hair. I miss her terrible singing. I miss fighting with her about chores. I miss having a mother. Eleanor reached across the table and took Clara's hand. I know, and I can't fix that. I can't bring her back. But I can promise you that her memory is safe with me. You can talk about her whenever you want. Be angry at her, miss her, laugh about her terrible biscuits. I'll never be threatened by her. I'll never ask you to choose. Clara squeezed her hand hard. Do you think she'd be okay with you being here? Eleanor considered the question carefully. I think she'd want her children to be cared for, to be loved, to have someone who shows up for them. If I'm doing that, then yes, I think she'd be okay with me. I think so too. Clara wiped her eyes. Eleanor, can I tell you something? Anything. When you first came, I hated you. I hated that Papa brought a stranger into our house. I hated that you were trying to do the things Mama used to do. I hated that the little one started smiling at you. I know. But then you didn't try to replace her. You just tried to help. And when Margaret got sick, you didn't leave. You stayed up all night, same as Papa. And I realized you weren't here to take anything from us. You were here to give. Eleanor's vision blurred. Clara, I'm not ready to call you Mama. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that. But I want you to know you are my mother now. Maybe not the one who gave birth to me, but the one who's here, the one who chose to stay. And that matters just as much. Eleanor couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She stood and pulled Clara into her arms, and they held each other in the moonlit kitchen, crying and healing and choosing each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were exhausted and lighter somehow. "We should sleep," Clara said, her voice rough. "We should." But neither moved. They sat together a while longer, drinking cold tea, sharing the silence. Finally, Clara stood. "Eleanor, thank you for loving us even when we made it hard. Thank you for letting me." After Clara went upstairs, Eleanor remained at the table. She touched the locket at her throat, thinking about the woman who'd worn it before her. Sarah Hale had been real, flawed and human and deeply loved. Eleanor would never replace her. But maybe, just maybe, she could honor her memory by caring for what Sarah had left behind. Eleanor climbed the stairs and slipped back into bed. Jonah stirred. "Everything all right?" he murmured, still half asleep. "Yes, everything's all right." He reached for her hand in the dark, and Eleanor moved closer, letting herself settle against his warmth. His arm came around her tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, he drew her nearer. "Eleanor?" His voice was clearer now. "Yes? I'm glad you're here, in case I haven't said that clearly enough." "You have, but I'm glad to hear it again." They lay tangled together, and for the first time since the wedding, Eleanor let herself imagine that this partnership might become something more. Not a replacement for what Jonah had lost, but something new built on mutual respect and growing affection. The seasons changed. Autumn arrived with crisp mornings and golden afternoons. The children returned to their lessons with renewed focus, Eleanor teaching the younger ones their letters while Ben tackled more advanced mathematics. Clara began talking about what she wanted beyond the ranch, tentative dreams of maybe teaching someday, maybe seeing what lay beyond these mountains. Jonah started lingering after supper, reading aloud while Eleanor mended or helping her with evening chores that he'd previously left entirely to her. They talked more, shared more, laughed occasionally at small absurdities. The careful distance between them eroded gradually, replaced by something warmer. One evening in late October, Eleanor was putting away dishes when Jonah came up behind her. His hand settled on her waist, gentle and questioning. Eleanor leaned back against him, and his arms came fully around her. "The children are asleep," he said quietly. "All of them?" "Even Ben, finally. He was reading by candlelight again." Eleanor smiled. "He gets that from you, I think. The stubbornness." "Probably." Jonah's breath was warm against her ear. "Eleanor, I want to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "What is it?" "This marriage, when we started, it was practical, necessary. But it's become more than that for me. And I'm wondering—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm wondering if it could be more for you too." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. His gray eyes were uncertain, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "What are you asking, Jonah?" "I'm asking if you'd be willing to let this become real. Not just in name, but in all the ways a marriage can be. I know I'm not offering romance or grand gestures, but I can offer partnership and respect and—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "And love, if you'll have it." Eleanor's breath caught. "Love?" "I didn't expect it. Didn't think I was capable of it anymore after Sarah. But somewhere between you staying up all night with Margaret and you standing up to Constance and you braiding Clara's hair the way her mother used to, I fell in love with you, Eleanor. Not because you replaced Sarah, but because you're you. Steady and kind and braver than you give yourself credit for." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "I thought you'd never see me as more than the practical choice." "You were never just practical. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, you were extraordinary. I was just too scared to admit it." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "I love you too. I've been terrified of it, tried to protect myself from it. But I love you, and I love these children, and I want this to be real." Jonah kissed her then, not the chaste press of lips from their wedding, but something deep and genuine and full of promise. Eleanor kissed him back, letting herself feel everything she'd been holding at bay, desire and hope, and the terrifying joy of being chosen, not for what she could provide, but for who she was. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "So we're doing this?" Jonah asked. "Really doing this?" "Yes, we're really doing this." That night, Eleanor and Jonah's marriage became whole. There was tenderness and laughter and the awkwardness of two people learning each other. but there was also rightness, the sense of pieces finally clicking into place. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Jonah's arms around her, Eleanor felt peace settle over her like a blanket. She'd come to this ranch believing she was broken, believing the best she could hope for was to be useful. Instead, she'd found belonging, purpose, love. Eleanor? Jonah's voice was drowsy. Hmm? Thank you for answering that advertisement, for taking a chance on us. Thank you for seeing past what I thought made me worthless. You were never worthless. You just needed people who could see your worth. Eleanor drifted off to sleep with those words warming her from the inside out. Winter arrived early and hard that year. Snow piled high around the ranch, and the family drew closer together against the cold. Eleanor taught the children to make candles and helped Clara piece together a quilt. The twins built elaborate snow forts. Ben read aloud to everyone on long evenings. Margaret and Caleb acted out elaborate stories with corn husk dolls Eleanor had shown them how to make. Jonah brought in a massive Christmas tree, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. On Christmas morning, there were small gifts, nothing extravagant but thoughtful. Eleanor had sewn new dresses for the girls, carved whistles for the boys. Jonah had bought her a beautiful shawl from the mercantile, soft wool dyed deep green. But the best gift came from Clara. She presented Eleanor with a framed photograph, Jonah, Sarah, and all 6 children, taken years ago when everyone was younger and Sarah was still alive. I thought you should have this, Clara said. So you know the family you married into. All of us, past and present. Eleanor traced the faces in the photograph, seeing Sarah clearly for the first time, a pretty woman with kind eyes and Clara's stubborn chin. She looked happy, surrounded by her family. Thank you, Eleanor said, her voice thick. I'll treasure this. I know you will. That's why I'm giving it to you. Eleanor placed the photograph on the mantel, where everyone could see it. Sarah's face looked out at her family, forever young, forever loved, forever part of them. And Eleanor felt no jealousy, no inadequacy, just gratitude that this woman had left such a beautiful legacy behind. That night, as the family gathered around the fire, Caleb climbed into Eleanor's lap. Mama Eleanor? He said, the name coming naturally now. Eleanor's heart swelled. Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to stay forever? Forever and ever? Even when we're bad? Especially when you're bad. That's when you need me most. He giggled and snuggled closer. Across the room, Jonah caught her eye and smiled. Clara was teaching Sarah a new embroidery stitch. Samuel and Ben were deep in conversation about some book they'd both read. Margaret dozed against Jonah's side. This was her family, broken and mended, grieving and healing, imperfect and beautiful. And Eleanor belonged to them completely. As winter melted into spring, life settled into patterns that felt permanent. Eleanor woke each morning to Jonah's kiss, made breakfast for children who called her mama more often than not, worked through her days with purpose and satisfaction. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. The children grew and learned and gradually released their grip on grief, letting joy back in. One afternoon in early May, Eleanor was working in the garden when she felt Jonah's presence behind her. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about the day you arrived, how terrified you looked stepping off that stagecoach, how certain I was that you'd run within a week." Eleanor laughed. "I almost did. Several times." "What stopped you?" She considered the question. "The children, at first. They needed someone and I couldn't abandon them. But later I stayed because I wanted to, because this became home, because you became mine and I became yours." Jonah pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "I never thought I'd feel this again. Contentment, hope, love. Neither did I. We're lucky, aren't we? To get a second chance." Eleanor thought about Thomas, about the doctor's diagnosis, about all the ways her life could have gone, about the woman she'd been when she arrived, hollow and convinced of her own inadequacy, and the woman she was now, whole and loved and certain of her worth. "Yes," she said, "we're incredibly lucky." That evening, after supper, Clara asked to speak with Eleanor privately. They went out to the porch, where the setting sun painted everything gold. "I've been accepted to the teaching college in Denver," Clara said. her voice trembling with excitement and fear. They have a program starting in the fall. I could get my certificate, come back and teach here, or maybe somewhere else. See what's beyond this ranch. Eleanor's heart clenched with pride and impending loss. That's wonderful, Clara. Your mother would be so proud. Would you be all right with me going? I know you need help here, and I don't want to abandon. Eleanor stopped her with a hand on her arm. You're not abandoning anyone. You're growing up. That's what you're supposed to do. But who'll help with the younger ones? We'll manage. We always do. This is your chance to build your own life, Clara. Take it. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared of leaving, of failing, of disappointing everyone. You could never disappoint us, and being scared just means you're doing something brave. Clara hugged her fiercely. Thank you for understanding, for not making me feel guilty. Your mother raised you to be independent and strong. I'm just honoring her work. They stood together watching the sunset, and Eleanor marveled at how far they'd all come. The broken, grieving family was healing. The children were finding their way forward. And Eleanor had found the family she'd thought she could never have. Summer came warm and generous. The ranch flourished. Ben took on more responsibility with the livestock, his shoulders broadening with the work. The twins grew more independent, still close, but developing separate interests, Sarah in cooking, Samuel in carpentry. Margaret started reading on her own, devouring books with the same enthusiasm her brother showed. Caleb followed Jonah everywhere, learning the ranch work with serious concentration. And Clara prepared to leave. Eleanor helped her pack, offering advice about city life and independence, while her heart broke a little. But it was the good kind of breaking, the kind that came from loving someone enough to let them go. The day Clara left for Denver, the whole family rode into town to see her off on the stagecoach. She hugged each of her siblings, promising to write every week. She embraced her father, both of them crying openly. And then she turned to Eleanor. I couldn't have done this without you, Clara said. You showed me it was okay to move forward, to build something new while still honoring what came before. You would have found your way regardless. You're your mother's daughter, stubborn and brilliant. I'm your daughter too now, if that's all right to say. Eleanor pulled her close. It's more than all right. I'm honored. I love you, Mama Eleanor. It was the first time Clara had called her that. Eleanor couldn't speak around the lump in her throat, just held her tighter. When the stagecoach pulled away, Eleanor stood with Jonah's arm around her waist, watching until Clara disappeared from view. The other children clustered around them, and Eleanor realized they weren't just a collection of broken pieces anymore. They were a family, whole and strong and ready for whatever came next. That fall, a letter arrived from Constance. Eleanor opened it with trepidation, but the contents surprised her. Dear Eleanor, I've been doing some thinking since my visit. My behavior was inexcusable, born of grief and fear rather than genuine concern. I've spoken with Clara several times. She writes to me regularly from Denver, and she speaks of you with such affection and respect that I can no longer deny the truth. You are good for those children. You honor my sister's memory while helping them build new lives. I was wrong to judge you, and I hope you can forgive me. If you're willing, I'd like to visit again at Christmas. Perhaps we can start over. Regards. Constance Eleanor showed the letter to Jonah. He read it and smiled. Will you let her come? Yes, she's family, and family gets second chances. Even when they don't deserve them? Especially then. Christmas that year was magical. Constance came and was genuinely kind, bringing thoughtful gifts and sharing memories of Sarah that made everyone laugh instead of cry. Clara came home from Denver full of stories about college and city life, her confidence blooming. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. On Christmas Eve, after the children had finally gone to bed, Eleanor and Jonah sat by the fire. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, watching the flames dance. Do you ever regret it? Jonah asked quietly. Answering that advertisement, coming here? Eleanor thought about the woman she'd been, convinced she was broken, certain she'd never have a family, running from a past that defined her by what she lacked. And she thought about the woman she'd become, loved and valued for exactly who she was, mother to 6 children she hadn't birthed but had chosen, wife to a man who saw her worth. Not for a single moment, she said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Even though you can't... He stopped, careful. Even though I can't have children of my own, Eleanor finished. Jonah, I have 6 children. They may not have come from my body, but they're mine in every way that matters. I didn't need to give birth to be a mother. I just needed to show up and love them. You've done more than that. You've saved us. All of us. We saved each other. That's how family works. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, the house was warm and full and home. Eleanor thought about miracles, not the kind that changed your body or rewrote your past, but the kind that happened when broken people chose to build something beautiful together. She'd thought her inability to have children defined her limits. Instead, it had led her here, to a family that needed exactly what she had to give. She touched the locket at her throat, feeling the weight of 2 women's love. Sarah's for the children she'd borne, Eleanor's for the children she'd chosen. Both loves were real, both mattered, and together they'd built something stronger than either could have created alone. Eleanor? Jonah's voice was soft. Thank you for staying, for choosing us, for building this life with me. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for showing me that broken doesn't mean worthless. He kissed her temple, and Eleanor closed her eyes, savoring the moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, children to raise, a ranch to run, a life to build day by day. But tonight, she could simply be. Eleanor Hale, wife and mother, beloved and belonging. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and inside, surrounded by the family she'd never expected to have, Eleanor was home. Spring returned with wildflowers carpeting the meadows and new calves wobbling on uncertain legs. Ben turned 13 and started talking about ranching seriously, his dreams shifting from adventures in far-off places to building something here. The twins turned 10 and celebrated by attempting to bake Eleanor a cake, which collapsed but tasted wonderful. Margaret learned to ride properly, no longer needing someone to lead her horse. Caleb started school lessons with fierce determination. And Eleanor bloomed. She'd gained weight, her face filling out from the gaunt anxiety she'd carried when she arrived. She laughed more freely, spoke her mind more confidently, moved through the house with the assurance of someone who knew she belonged. One morning in late April, she woke to find Jonah watching her. "What?" she asked, smiling. "I was just thinking about what you said once, about being broken." Eleanor's smile faded slightly. "What about it?" "You were never broken. You were just told you were because you couldn't do one specific thing. But look at everything you can do. Everything you have done. You've raised 6 children who aren't yours by blood, but are yours in every other way. You've built a home. You've created a family from pieces that didn't seem to fit. If that's broken, I'll take broken over whole any day." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I used to think my worth was measured by what I could produce, what my body could do. And now? Now I know my worth is measured by what I choose to give, by who I choose to love, by showing up even when it's hard. You've taught me that too. After Sarah died, I thought my capacity for love had died with her. You showed me hearts don't work that way. Love doesn't run out. It multiplies." Eleanor kissed him, soft and lingering. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both convinced we had nothing left to give. And both wrong." They lay tangled together as morning light filled the room, and Eleanor marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She'd answered an advertisement expecting hard work and loneliness. She'd found purpose and belonging, and a love she'd stopped believing was possible. The day Clara graduated from teaching college, the whole family made the trip to Denver. Eleanor watched her daughter, because that's what Clara was now, in every way that mattered, except her certificate with pride blazing in her eyes. Afterward, Clara introduced them to her friends, her professors, the life she was building. "Are you coming back to the ranch?" Margaret asked hopefully. Clara knelt down to her level. "Not permanently. I've accepted a teaching position here in Denver, but I'll visit, often. And you can come see me." The little girl's face fell, but she nodded bravely. Clara looked at Eleanor, question in her eyes. "You're doing exactly what you should be doing," Eleanor assured her. "We're proud of you. I'll miss you all terribly. We'll miss you too. But this is right. You're meant for more than the ranch." That night, in their hotel room, Jonah held Eleanor while she cried. "It's supposed to hurt, isn't it?" she said. Watching them grow up and leave? Yes, it means we did our job. We loved them well enough that they're strong enough to go. I just wish. Eleanor stopped. What? I wish I could have had this from the beginning. Watched them grow from infancy. Had more time. Jonah stroked her hair. But you didn't need more time to become their mother. You became that the moment you chose to stay. The moment you fought for them. The moment you loved them more than you protected yourself. Eleanor knew he was right. Biology hadn't made her a mother. Choice had. Commitment had. Love had. The years passed with the steady rhythm of seasons. Ben took over more of the ranch operations, becoming Jonah's true partner in the work. The twins both married, Sarah to a neighboring rancher's son, Samuel to a girl from town who loved his quiet strength. Margaret went to nursing school, determined to help people the way Eleanor had helped her family. Caleb grew tall and strong, more like his father every day. And through it all, Eleanor was there, watching, supporting, loving. She attended weddings and welcomed grandchildren. She nursed family members through illnesses and celebrated their triumphs. She became the family's anchor, the one everyone came home to. One autumn evening, 20 years after she'd first arrived at the ranch, Eleanor sat on the porch with Jonah. They were both gray now, their bodies slower but their hearts still strong. The house behind them echoed with the sounds of visiting grandchildren. Sarah's 3, Samuel's 2, more on the way. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Jonah asked. Sometimes. If I'd never answered your advertisement, if I'd run like I wanted to, if I'd let my fear win. I'm grateful you didn't. So am I. Eleanor took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades. You know what the strangest thing is? What? I spent so many years thinking I was less than because I couldn't have children, thinking my body's limitation defined my worth. And now I have 16 grandchildren and counting, none of them carrying my blood, all of them carrying my love. That's not strange. That's beautiful. It is, isn't it? I thought I'd never be a mother. Instead, I became mother to 6, grandmother to many, the heart of a family I never could have imagined. Jonah pulled her close. You once told me you were broken. Do you still believe that? Eleanor thought about the medical report she'd kept all these years, the words that had once defined her entire existence. She thought about the life she'd built despite those words, the family she'd created, the love she'd given and received. No, she said firmly. I'm not broken. I never was. I was just meant for a different kind of miracle. What kind? The kind where love matters more than biology, where choosing matters more than bearing, where showing up every day, even when it's hard, creates something more lasting than any physical legacy could. Behind them, a grandchild laughed. Inside, their children were gathered, talking and eating and being family. And Eleanor realized she'd never answered that original question, did she regret coming here? She regretted nothing. Not the fear, not the struggle, not the pain of growing into this life. Because all of it had led to this moment, sitting beside the man she loved, surrounded by the family she'd built one choice at a time. Thank you, she said quietly. Jonah looked at her. For what? For seeing me. For asking me to stay. For loving me exactly as I am. Thank you for saying yes. For staying when it would have been easier to run. For showing me that life can begin again, even when you think it's over. They sat in the gathering dusk, two people who'd both believed they were broken, who'd built something whole from their shattered pieces. The ranch spread out before them, generations of love soaked into every board and beam. This was Eleanor's legacy, not children from her womb, but a family from her heart. And it was more than enough. It was everything. As the stars began to appear overhead, Eleanor touched the locket at her throat, worn now, but still precious. Inside were photos of Sarah and her children, and newer ones of Eleanor with her grandchildren. 2 women, 2 kinds of love, woven together into one unbroken story. Tell me again, Eleanor said softly. About the day I arrived. Jonah smiled, knowing this story by heart. You stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified and determined all at once. Your hands were shaking, but your chin was up. And I thought, this woman is either very brave or very desperate. Turned out you were both. I was definitely desperate, but also brave. Braver than you knew. You took a chance on us when you had every reason not to, and you changed everything. We changed everything. Together. Together, Jonah agreed. Inside, someone called that supper was ready. Eleanor stood, Jonah rising beside her, and together they walked into the warm, noisy house full of the family they'd built. Not from biology or obligation, but from choice and commitment and the fierce, transformative power of love. Eleanor had once believed her inability to bear children meant she'd never have a family. Instead, she'd discovered that family wasn't about blood. It was about showing up, staying, choosing to love even when loving meant risking loss. She'd thought she was broken, but she'd been wrong. She'd simply been waiting for the right place to bloom. And bloom she had. Into a mother, a wife, a grandmother, the beating heart of a family that would carry her love forward through generations. Living proof that the most profound miracles aren't always the ones we expect. They're the ones we build ourselves, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of love at a time. And Eleanor's miracle was this: a barren woman who became the mother of multitudes, not through her womb, but through her heart. A woman who'd thought herself insufficient, who'd learned she was more than enough. A woman who'd run from her past and found her future waiting in the dust of a Wyoming ranch, in the eyes of 6 grieving children, in the steady presence of a man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. This was her story. Not the one she'd imagined, but the one she'd chosen. And it was perfect in its imperfection, whole in its brokenness, complete in ways she'd never dreamed possible. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night. And inside, surrounded by love and laughter and the family that claimed her completely, Eleanor was finally, truly home.